Hi everybody, I am Michael Haley Goldman from New Hampshire Humanities. Thank you for being here, being part of this. I think what Linda has already mentioned is the key point. I'll talk a little bit about New Hampshire Humanities maybe for like 30 seconds at the end. This is what we do, which is bringing together these amazing groups that are in the room right now. Thanks to Linda and the Women's Club for being in this amazing location and bringing this together. Thanks to Cheryl and Dismas House for being part of this program as well. Wanted to also thank the other partner in this is from the State Department of Corrections. We have Tiffany here who's going to be part of this. And also to Gloria Norris for being here for this event. These are people from all around the state who have a little bit of overlap in what we do, but all of it makes this a better state. This makes this the place that we want to live, and you all do as well, so thank you for being here. I'm going to turn it over because I don't want to stand between you and the program, so I'm going to hand it over to Cheryl.
Oh, okay. I'm Cheryl Andrews. I'm Executive Director at the Dismas Home in Manchester. We serve women, justice-involved women, including veterans, who suffer from substance use and underlying trauma and mental illness triggered by that trauma. Our program is residential. Residents stay with us for about 10 months, soon to be longer by our contract. And what we offer them is a second chance. They have the opportunity to make a major change in their lives, learn how to live independently with long-term recovery. Our first 90 days is a treatment program. We treat the underlying trauma. We help them get healthy physically, mentally, and spiritually. And then we add in heavy case management for the next 6 months to help them find skills that they might not have. It could be an educational piece, certainly workforce development, it's certainly about housing, but sometimes it comes down to basic life skills. Many of the residents we serve are the least of these, and we are very proud to serve them. And we are working on an expansion program so that we can serve more women who need a second chance. And so we're grateful for the opportunity to stand here in front of you and share a little bit about what we do and who we serve, and to be part of this whole program because Cuckoo Land is something that our residents have grasped onto, and they're loving the whole book club process. And so thank you all for making it possible. We appreciate it.
So sit here.
We're going to share a microphone.
Is it okay if you share a microphone? Yeah, all right.
Thank you everybody for coming today, and this is really a collaborative effort between a lot of organizations. My name is Mary Nolan. I'm the Connections Program Manager at New Hampshire Humanities, and I feel like before we start today's discussion, it's really important that you understand the Connections Program, what it is, and how this conversation today will be grounded in literature and the humanities. So the Connections Program has been around in New Hampshire for 35 years, and it's a book discussion program for a really specific group of adults. So we work with refugees and immigrants coming to New Hampshire to learn a new language, to learn a new culture, to learn a new history. We also work with individuals with disabilities who are looking to find community through literature that they really don't have after they leave K-12 education. We also work with individuals completing high school in alternative pathways. That could be through a GED program or a high school equivalency test. And what brings us here today is that we work in state and county correctional facilities to help those who are in prison or justice impacted or currently incarcerated stay connected with their children and their family through literature. And we also use literature as a medium for participants to share their stories. So Connections will provide up to 4 free books and 4 free facilitated discussions for these classes over a course of a year. And we work with nearly 600 adults across 8 of New Hampshire's 10 counties. And I want to give particular focus to the importance of stories in the Connections program. Not only are the participants reading and discussing stories in diverse pieces of literature, from picture books to advanced literary works, but stories are at the heart of the Connections program because we use literature to allow participants to tell their own story. And so each of these women on our panel today have a unique story and a unique experience with literature, both personally and professionally. So we'll use those stories to explore how literature and the humanities specifically can help us discuss and better understand these big issues around incarceration, around substance abuse, and around poor mental health affecting many Granite Staters. So my first question to each of the panelists is, tell us your story. Introduce us a little bit about who you are and a little bit about what you do and what you want people to know about you.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Arsenault. I'm the administrator for the Family Connection Center at the New Hampshire Department of Corrections. So what we do is provide parent education and support. We're a family resource center. And we also provide case management for family-related matters as well as unique opportunities for them to connect with their kids. So Humanities has really helped out with that, with the literature piece of one of the things that we offer is them to record stories and create an audiobook. So they send the recording and the book home to their kiddo so that, right, we can have that connection at the will of the child when they feel like they need to hear their parent, as well as reading to them. So definitely a two-prong there, which is just wonderful. We get a lot of really good feedback on that. And then the other piece is that we're able to help them foster some deeper conversations with their kids on things that are overlapping. So it's a wonderful experience, and I was grateful to have this opportunity to come sit here and talk about it too, because I think that the work needs to be highlighted in that we're all doing and overlapping, and it's all impacting us as our little state. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Gloria Norris, and I wrote this book, Cuckoo Land, and it's been an incredible journey. My history a little bit is I grew up in Manchester, and I had a crazy father. Anyone who's dipped into the book will know what I'm saying, and very challenging home environment, and many of the issues that Mary mentioned are woven throughout this book. Substance abuse certainly, and trouble with the law, because my father was basically doing all kinds of criminal activity. But he was a pretty good criminal. He didn't get caught that much, so he didn't spend a lot of time incarcerated, but he should have. So there's that, and then also, mental health issues. And so I grew up in that kind of soup, and the book really, I wanted to explore that from the child's perspective. So a lot of the book is told from my 9-year-old point of view. And I hope that's not mine. And yeah, so, and then, continues through, for me as an adult. And it's been, inspiring for people to encounter this book. And it's been, incredible for me to encounter New Hampshire, because I went to Bennington and Sarah Lawrence. I went to some hoity-toity schools, and, I was able to then have a career in the film industry as a screenwriter and a film producer, and worked on some movies that were also always had kind of somewhat of a social conscience. I did one about a war photographer and what PTSD is like for people who are going into war zones and documenting. And I just always wanted to tell this story, but movies, it didn't seem like I was going to be able to get a deal to do it, because it's, too quirky and dark or whatever. So I thought, I'm going to write my first book. So I did. I thought maybe people in New Hampshire might, not embrace it, to put it mildly. I thought they might, think I had shown the city in a bad light, but turned out it was embraced, and I have done many wonderful events and, in various venues, from high schools to other, incarceration facilities, where I've shared the book with different people, and it's been, an amazing journey. So I'm grateful to be here and to, learn more about you and share more later.
My name is Laurel Ayotte. I am here today from Dismas Home. The place it gave me a safe place to start my recovery. A little background would be, I come from a pretty large family, 7 kids. There was certainly alcoholism in the family. It was a pretty fractured family. As I got to be a teen, I was taken away from my parents, put in group homes and foster homes until I was about 17. From there, I did what kids do at 17. Around 21, I had my first child. From there, I went on to have 3 more. And after I had my kids, I began, after losing my dad and my grandfather in like a 6-month span, I turned to drugs and alcohol to self-medicate. And that's pretty much how I ran my life from 28 till I was 50. And then I found myself incarcerated again. And this time it was a little bit more serious than before, any other time before. And I was scared. I was really scared that I was going to prison. So I did everything I could in the year I spent waiting for, either the trial or to plead out. And I found MRT. It's a program they offer in Cheshire County. And for some reason, that just clicked with me. And I put myself all into it. And it took me 22 weeks to finish 12 steps, but I did it. And it's still something I'm very proud of. So once I finished that, I knew I lost everything going to jail. My home, everything. So I knew I had to find somewhere to go that I could continue this journey of recovery. And it was suggested to me by a former resident who perhaps wasn't ready for the program and was asked to leave. But if this does it, she said to me, I want to tell you, this is a terrible program. You don't want to go there. She said, but I can't tell you that. It's a wonderful program. So it's the only program I applied for, praying that I would get it. 2 weeks later, because it's only an 8-bed facility, I figured the waiting list was a mile long. 2 weeks later, which was like 2 months before I was getting out, I was told I was accepted. So I've been there 8 months now. And probably for the very first time in my life, about 2 weeks into it, I felt completely, absolutely safe. And every single staff member makes you feel like you're their only client. They are there to support you, to cheer you on, to be a shoulder to cry on. And all any of them want is the best for us. So I think every addict gets to a point where they'll just try anything. I know that's the point I reached. Just give it all to me. AA, all of it. Just give it all to me and see what sticks. But Dismas Home has stuck. And I am very grateful that they allowed me a place in their home.
And so I'm I'm going to come back to you, Tiffany. Could you talk a little bit about how the impact of, using literature for the men and women that you work with at the Family Connection Center, like what is the impact on them? What do you see? What's the benefit of bringing literature into a correctional facility in the work that you do?
So the benefit, we definitely see it, and I have two of my coworkers here who are working with the men at the Concord facility. We're able to see it in the conversations we have with them through support group. So they come to a weekly support group as well. And you can tell when those, and kind of like you're saying, right, they're ready to grab something or hope something sticks. And there's this shift in them that they're ready to really think differently and to not read the book or engage in the conversation to argue, but to expand their brain, right? To go with that growth mindset idea, which is really helpful. Because what we're often doing in our work is, yes, we're working with parents, but sometimes we're also trying to work, in a sense, with their inner child, because maybe it's the first time they're sober in a long time, or they're finally at that point of accepting. So we really look and try to do like a two-prong approach for any of our groups and classes, teaching them some of the basics, and then saying, okay, how can this apply to your kids as a parenting role? How can you use this to build that relationship? Because our goal is to sometimes help them repair or at least maintain the existing relationships that they have. So the literature allows them to think differently, and we're there all the time. So it's nice to have a different face or a different voice coming in to push them to get their thinking to go a little bit further. And they have that opportunity, and then they can, again, share it with their kids. So then we're able to see it also when we're supervising their video visits with their children, if they're drawing those parallels. Hey, I took a class today too, and we did this book. What are you guys doing? Because often the books that are selected are, like you had mentioned, a variety. Some of them are younger picture books, some of them are longer ones, and so it's really hitting everybody on every level, so it's not excluding anyone because of, maybe they have a hard time reading or whatnot, but they're really included to try to make it do something for them. And again, it's one of those bonding things. So they're in this group, and it's a special little club that they get to be part of, and that's always really special for them too.
And Laurel, I'm going to come back to you. Books have been part of your life for a long time, and maybe you could speak a little bit about that and speak about your two experiences reading Cuckoo Land, because she's read it twice, and I thought that was such an important story that you told me the other day.
So, growing up, my parents were kind of preoccupied with their own lives. They weren't parents that took you to all your school functions. They never came to a school play. We seldom made it to the school plays unless, other parents would bring us. So, my way of escaping that, of course, was books. And still, to this day, I am an avid reader. And there's actually probably more than several books that I've read more than once, because I find that you find something different every time. I didn't expect to read Cuckoo Land twice. When I first got to Dismas House, there was a copy, and I pretty much read through their entire bookshelf. And so I'm like, okay, and all the pictures on the front of her book could have come out of my family album. Absolutely no doubt. And though I did not have my dad was similar, he was so funny, but he was not mean about his funny. He was my dad got custody of my sister and I in 1974, which we all know never happened in 1974. No men get custody of their kids, or not very often. He was a charming, almost too charming man, which is what got him in trouble. So yeah, I spent my favorite subject was English. That was my favorite subject. I loved book reports. Oh man, did I write long book reports. And I was an avid journal or diary writer. It was diaries for me, not journals. It's journals now. And so when I got to Dismas House and I picked up her book, I read it just for me, just for the enjoyment of reading. And I was raving about it to anybody who would listen at the house. I'm like, you guys gotta read this, you have got to read this. So when our director took me aside and said, Laurel, what do you think about us reading this? She was the only one, I think, that I hadn't mentioned the book to, and I was so excited. I'm like, I've already read it. Yes, I'll read it again. So I did, and I saw a whole different perspective from the first time reading it, and I actually got more emotionally invested in it the second time. Now, after listening to Gloria read today, now I've got to go listen to it on Audible, because she is the one that does the story, and she was very powerful today reading a few passages from the book. So yes, books mean a lot to me. I was incarcerated for 16 months, and I read 347 books in that time. So I kept track of every single one. So.
Thank you, Laurel. And Gloria, this next question is for you. Can you tell us a little bit more about your book, Cuckoo Land, and why you decided to write it, but also the different impact maybe that you've seen the book have on different audiences?
Well, I would say it's a story I've wanted to tell, for a long time. As I said, I didn't think I would be able to get it done as a movie. But I also had always, wanted the freedom to do a book, because with screenplays, you have to be very, very succinct. And I thought, it'd be nice to, be able to pull things out a little bit more and not feel that restriction of a page count and so on. But what the screenwriting actually did for me in terms of, I think, adding to the book and making it easier for people to read is there's a lot of dialogue in it, and there's short chapters, like little scenes. And a lot of people have mentioned that to me, that it was and I wanted that. I wanted to be able to not have it seem like a highfalutin book, because I didn't grow up in a highfalutin life, and people think of books as sort of something that only, educated people, would be interested in. And I had the example of my father where, he was a person who ended up late in life getting a GED, but he dropped out of high school. But he was a voracious reader. And so that had an impact on me, but it was, again, age-inappropriate books. I was reading, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, because you'd mentioned something about books that are influential. And that was like, he was a big Ken Kesey fan, and, people that you wouldn't imagine that he would like. Certainly, 1984 and, that kind of book he was crazy about. So, but interestingly, he did not, I was never read to as a child. I had no books, no children's books at all. And nobody ever read to me, but he did take me, he'd go to the library, and since he was dragging me all over the city, anyone who's read the book, usually it was to the bookie joint, but he did go to the library, so then I could go and get some books myself. And that's how I, was able to become a reader. And I didn't think that it was going to touch on so many different, groups of people. I've had events at high schools and colleges and also other incarceration facilities and, even, different ages, that's been amazing to me because, like you were talking about, the lingo, resonated. People of a certain age, which I am, there's certain things that are from that period. But today, I went to the bookery because I wanted to get some journals for the women at Dismas Home. And the young woman behind the cash register, when I was looking, she said, "You wrote Cuckoo Land," and she was like 19 years old, and I thought, that's really cool to me. That she said, "I love this book so much," And, it's not a period that she or probably even her parents, lived through. I'm like her grandparent age at this point. So that's what literature can do. It goes across gender, it goes across, time. And in terms of why I wanted to do it, I feel still that there is not enough written about domestic violence. And this is an issue. When you think about it, there are 8,000 movies and TV shows about serial killers. How common is this? Not as common as domestic violence, but there's just not enough talk about it. Women are, more in danger when they leave. And the book shows the two sides of this. One woman who stayed and one woman who tried to leave. And that was really an important story that I wanted to tell.
Thank you, Gloria, and I'll come back to a couple of those points that you just raised in a minute. Tiffany, the Connections program from New Hampshire Humanities isn't the only literature-based program that you use at the Family Connections Center. Could you talk about other programs that you use and just how many children you're able to connect with through these programs?
So the other primary program that we work with is the Children's Literacy Foundation, CLIF, out of Vermont. So what they do, similar in numbers, is 4 times a year they come into each of our facilities and they have a short session on literacy. And so folks sign up for it, they come, they listen, and then at the end of that they're able to pick a couple of books that the foundation sends home to their children or nieces, grandchildren. So that one is a little more broad. And they pay for them, right? So all they're doing is coming and listening, and then they have to select a book. And what is cool there is, since they're consistent, they come back and they're able to put in a special request. So they might spark a kid to jump into a series or a genre. And so we hear them as it comes closer, hey, did you like that book last time? Which one what number are you on? Or, whichever it might be. And so it's able to, again, that connection occurs. And so they're able to continue that conversation focused on literature. And I agree with what you said. It doesn't matter what it is, that you can always pull something out of it to connect with and to use for a conversation point. So it's pretty awesome. Our program, so we work with the parents who are incarcerated. That's our primary population. And it's hard to tell as far as numbers go. On average, each between the 2 men's facilities and the women's facility, we have, about 200 probably active participants. But what that means to us, because we're not a program that you do and you're done. So they join and then we tell them they're with us now because they're parents and so they can't be done parenting. And so they come into our program and we have an education, a parent ed class, we have a healthy relationships class, and then ongoing support groups. So sometimes we have folks, depending on what their sentence is. I've worked with some men for 15 years and they've been there and their kids have grown up, but they're still in our program because now they're encouraging others to take part in these activities, and they're encouraging them how to use the material. And so we see this kind of mentoring occur, which is wonderful. And so on average, kind of like in general population, most people, there's probably a couple of kids to each of them. Some have 1, some have 4, 5, 6. But it's hard to tell exactly what our impact is on the kids because not everybody that we work with has contact with their children. So we encourage them to join our program for self-betterment, regardless if they have contact with their children or not, in the hopes of them doing some building from the inside out, and then hopefully maybe they can repair that or make that connection later on. And so, but usually, again, there's hundreds of kids that indirectly we're able to impact, hopefully by some measure as they go forward.
And you mentioned the 3 different facilities, so there are 2 state prisons in Berlin, there's 2 in Concord, the men's and the women's facility, and then there's 1 in Berlin. And Gloria, I thought it would be kind of important to have you talk about your friend Susan Piasny, both the impact that she had on you, because she was a pretty incredible woman for her time, but also I think she also had a role in forming the women's state prison that I think it's important for people to know about. So I thought you could talk about that and how it came up in your book.
Yes, thanks. I'm grateful for that question because, being here actually, as I drove the corner, I think, Susan was in one of the facilities, right? I think maybe it was next door even. Is there a little halfway house? It was right close by. I'm blanking on the name, but she was in a place that she was living after, she was incarcerated. Yes, some people here have read the book, some people haven't. It's a story about, I'll try to be brief, for those who've read it, about my family and this other family. My father and the man in the family were close. And he had a daughter named Susan. He was Hank Piaz, and he had a big sporting goods store in Manchester where all the hunters and the police and everybody would go there and buy their guns. And Susan would work there in the summer. And I had heard about her since I could remember. She was a true, golden girl. She was, first of all, she was beautiful, but she was absolutely brilliant. Like anything she touched, she could just learn things. She was an athlete, skiing, horseback riding, acting. She had some poems that were published before she was even in college. In researching the book, I went up to Colby Junior College, or it was Colby Sawyer then, or Colby Sawyer now. Anyway, I found she had been the editor-in-chief of her college paper, and she wrote these incredible editorials about apartheid and coal miners who were striking for better wages. And she was, she wanted to be a doctor, and at that point I had never even seen a lady doctor, but she was one of 6 in her medical school at the University of Vermont. And she also, because should I tell what happened in the book a little bit? Okay. So her father killed her mother. Mother was leaving him, or left him. And so she was told by the dean of the college one day that her mother had been murdered. And this person who had so many dreams and so much to offer, she wanted to be a doctor for poor children and find a cure for cancer, and she probably could have done it. She was that smart. Her life got derailed. So she was able to, kind of pick up the pieces a little bit. She did get into medical school, but she couldn't sustain it, and she was just a few months away from graduating when she just had to drop out. She had many physical problems, which were from the stress of growing up around domestic violence and from, the loss of her mother, who she was extremely, extremely close to. But once she was and then she ended up, with all kinds of substance abuse issues and getting arrested. I think she got arrested in 3 different communities in New Hampshire in one day. So that tells you how bad it was. Like Manchester, Concord, and one other place, I can't remember. But literally, she got arrested in 3 jurisdictions in one day. But when she was in there, she, found out that there was no, facility long-term. There was no women's prison. So the women were put in these, jails or, whatever, or they were often shipped off to Michigan or different places where they couldn't have any, relationship with their children. They were torn away from them. And then they were forced to knit mittens for the men. They had no outdoor exercise or anything like that. And she said, I think this is illegal, because she was so smart. And she kind of got this thing going, and it became a case called Fiandaca, a famous case, Fiandaca versus Cunningham, where she got these lawyers involved. It became a class action suit to sue the state of New Hampshire to build a prison for women for long-term incarceration. And she prevailed. However, it took them 20-something years to actually do it. And they were supposed to do it in 2 years. It was terrible. I mean, really, they said, a temporary facility, which was Goffstown. That was where they kind of came upon that, this is where we can do it. But within 2 years, you should build a facility. And they dragged their feet, and they just, so it did literally. There were some attorneys in town that stayed on the case, one of them reached out to me, he was pretty old. And he said, they're finally building the prison, maybe you want to get a tour of it or whatever. I couldn't believe how long it took. But, I mean, at least they did finally, build it. But she was instrumental. So even though she had her own issues that she was struggling with, she cared about other people and the other women who, were not able to be with their children, and it was so unfair and illegal for them to be treated the way they were. So, yeah, we owe a lot to Susan.
Thank you,
Did
Gloria.
she live to see it?
No.
No.
And so I think it's really important to kind of, Laurel, have you share your story, like how different it is from Susan's living at Dismas Home. Could you tell us a little bit about what it's like living at Dismas Home now and kind of the
Day-to-day.
day-to-day, what it's like there? And I know you've been there for 9 months and will soon be, kind of transitioning out, but kind of tell how
Yeah.
different it is at Dismas Home.
Our first 3 months is pretty rigid, to say. You have stepped down, the first 2 weeks you're there, you have to stay in the house. You do not go anywhere. After that, after 2 weeks, you can go out and about for, I don't know, like 2 hours, I think, with another resident, as a buddy system, which I have found is something that, especially for the women who lived in Manchester with their addiction, it's a good thing to do every day. It wouldn't be just the first 2 weeks. But after 30 days, you're allowed 4 hours a day out and about in the community. But around that, they want you to be sure that you're absorbing the recovery community. You want to go find an AA group that suits you, so you try them. You try one here, you try one there, and you find it. We've all found our home groups, which is pretty amazing. Plus, they bring us to 3 groups, 3 AA meetings a week, which I have to say, we're very invested in those groups because they're the ones you go to the longest. We have our relapse prevention, we have our house meeting. We need to be up and dressed and ready for the day completely by 9:30. And recently, we've kind of cut that back to 9 o'clock for most of us. We do meditation and readings from, as Bill sees it, just for today, and I do a reading from, for women, it's the Chicken Soup for Women's Soul, daily reader, that's an amazing book, which Miss Colleen is the one who got a bunch of chicken soup and a bunch of new books, thank God, for me to read. And that one turned out to be really great and beneficial to all of us. And we've had today was probably the most special day that we've had since I've been there, with Gloria coming, and we were all like, seriously, like little kids this morning, like, looking out the window, is that her, is that her? She looked exactly like her picture. I knew she was. She pulled up and she rolled down her window because she was having trouble. It wasn't an easy parking spot. And she's like, I'm Gloria, and I said, yes, you are. So, yeah, we have case management, several groups during the day, during the week. But there are offices, and we have, thank God, for clinical services with the director, Diane, who's an awesome trauma specialist. She has used EMDR, several different ways to bring that trauma from here to like here. And there was a time that I could not sit here, which you've all seen me tear up. There was a time that I could not sit here without crying through the whole thing. But that's due to the services at Dismas House that I can finally breathe, and I can finally face each day actually pretty positive outlook on where I'm going. I'm very, very blessed in that way. As of this month, I'll be sober 2 years, the end of this month.
And so this is a question for each of our panelists. There's, as we said, there's 4 different organizations here today and a lot of people who are really vested in their community. And I thought it would be important for each of you to kind of talk about, can you see any possible actions that communities can take to help individuals affected by mental health, substance abuse, or incarceration? What advice would you give to them to get involved?
I think there's just so many things. What comes to mind for me in my role and what we do is the idea of remembering that we're all impacted by substance use and mental health, and whether or not we accept it, the degree of connection to somebody who's been incarcerated isn't typically all that far. So, whether we're working in a helping role or we're just neighbors with someone, we really need to think about how most people are going to be getting released from prison or jail or whatever, their incarceration experience is, and they're coming back into our communities. And so how can we be better so that we can be more welcoming when we think about the stigma that goes with incarceration and substance use and mental health, right? When you layer those all together, it just must be so intimidating to come back and to try to resume your role in whatever that may be, whether it's a family member or work or just showing up somewhere. So my action, I suppose, is really to just accept that we all have that connection and to think about it from the perspective of if it was us or somebody that we loved, and maybe it has been, and how can we be more supportive as a community?
Yeah, the word that, stuck out for me is stigma, that you just said. One of the chapters that I read this morning was about when I went into the local store and the lady accused me of stealing because she was out of the candy that I used to like to buy, but there was no candy there. And she made me, empty my pockets. And there was a stigma because I lived in the projects. So, whether it was in the school where the teacher, every year I would have to feel I've got to win them over because they look at the address, where you live, and it's going to be an uphill battle for me, even though I was a straight A student through school. But, it just, there was the 3rd grade where she just wouldn't call on me at all. And then, I went home and I was crying, and my father comes in and he's threatening to get some, and he called them Dagos, the people from the gangsters who were around, Providence or whatever, to come and, kneecap her. And I'm like, no, that's not going to really be a good idea. But there was, stigma about the address, and then the lady at the store knew that I was a project kid. And so there's a projection there and an automatic, like, that person's going to be, stealing because they live there, or that person's going to be stealing because they were incarcerated, whatever. If we can just all, try not to do that, it would make the world a lot better of a place, So because I experienced firsthand that just people wanted to peg me as something that I wasn't, whether it was a thief or whatever. So.
I've been sitting here thinking how to answer this question, and my what would you call it? I just believe in being kind. Everybody is going through something. It doesn't have to be substance abuse or mental health. Everybody, if we could just be kind to one person today, it would make this whole world a different place. Don't automatically assume things about people by the way they look. Maybe they have tattoos, maybe they have piercings. That does not mean anything. That's just the cover. That's just the cover of the book. I have to say that most of the addicts I know are some of the most sensitive, creative, amazing people that you would want to know. And it's just sad that they get overlooked. So don't overlook people and just be kind. If you don't know, just be kind.
Thank you, Laurel. And this will be my final question before we open it up to the audience for questions. I think it's because of my job, but I feel like literature can play a really important role in changing the narrative around incarceration, around substance abuse, around mental health. And I'm just wondering if each of you could kind of speak to that. What role does literature and the humanities play in changing that narrative or addressing that stigma?
So I think with changing the narrative, one thing, and it was kind of my thought going with the book too, and I listened to it, and when I got to the end of it, I just, because of my experience personally and professionally, thought, well, this is kind of a common story, isn't it? Just thinking that it's so normal. And I think that's when we think about the narrative, right, there's that fine line between validating that you're not alone. So a lot of those I've talked to about it, some of the women I talked to about this, and then some of the men too, and it's something they can relate to. And I think when you realize that literature can provide them that opportunity to get validation, that it's not just them, and then to open the conversation to, oh, we can talk about this. Because again, back to stigma, you can't talk about it. And there must be something wrong with you, or your parents were bad, or whatever it might be. So allowing literature to open the conversation so that we can maybe impact them in the right direction, or at least, and this is where we come into in an indirect way, is maybe break that cycle. Maybe they're going to be the cycle breaker, so that because now they're okay to talk about it through literature as a tool, so they're talking to their kids. And now their kids have the information, the knowledge, without maybe going through it, or they can talk about it sooner. So I think that would be.
Thank you. I agree, Tiffany. Gloria, we'll go to you.
Well, I think I'm an artist, and I think that's really what, art is about and what art can do. It's a mirror, ideally to hold up to, feelings. Everybody's the same. Everybody has disappointments, trauma, feels stigmatized in some way, and you just hope that through literature or when I've worked on movies or other things, that people connect with it, and it's our shared humanity, and what else is there in the world? I mean, except to try to have community and connect with other people, and so that's been the great joy of this book. I mean, you just never know, maybe nobody's going to relate to what you as an artist have to say or trying to say. You hope, you're always struggling and thinking, am I successful with getting across what I'm trying to feel? Or sometimes you don't even know what you're feeling. Sometimes you look at the page and you go, I wrote that? Wow. Because the subconscious is so mysterious, how it, the process of writing or creating things. It's, even in today, I just think, wow, I can't, sometimes I look at it and I think, I can't believe I did that. But the bottom line is that I wanted to, shine a light on a lot of these issues, and I just think that literature does that, and it's been reinforced to me by all the different kinds of people, like I said, who've connected with it, and so it's invaluable, and I think it's something, obviously, that we have to, we don't want to censor or do any of those things that are going on right now. Literature is to be, treasured and, held up as something that can, really change the world person by person.
I was someone who wasn't read to as a child, but I knew as soon as I had children that I was going to read to them as often as I possibly could, and I got great joy out of it, as did they. I also believe that there are tons of people out there that say, I don't read, I can't read, and when people say that to me, I'll be like, I'll read to you, because I do enjoy reading out loud. I'm usually the first one to jump to it when we have groups, and then like to somebody, me, I'll read. And my husband would probably give me the evil eye for this, but he was one of those people that had extreme trouble reading and learning growing up. And when we first got married, I just insisted that, because you learn. Every time you read a book, you learn, and it keeps your mind sharp, and you learn about new things that you didn't know before. And you get to go into different worlds that maybe don't exist, but who's to say they don't or won't eventually. So I just started reading to him every night before I would shut off our light to go to bed, and he would be so, eventually he'd be like, read another chapter, read another chapter. And I realized then that two people sitting down and just discussing a book or reading a book is really an amazing thing, because two people get two totally different things out of it. So I am a strong believer in literature and reading to people and teaching people to read. It's a sad thing. I myself have two nephews who cannot read, but yet graduated from high school. That says a lot for the school system in that area. But it made me very sad, and I kind of chased them around for a while, trying to get them to read more, but no. So I think it is very important to get it out there for everyone. Everyone should have access to books, period.
Thank you, Laurel. All right, we'll open it up to questions. If people have questions, maybe you can help me take them to people. Questions that people would like to answer. Ask.
Well, this is great and very encouraging. Some of us here in the club were involved in Goffstown. And we did, Hansi was part of the book club for a number of years. And then, and Debbie, you were in that. And then some of us did once a month, we did enrichment programs. But it was very difficult in Goffstown. I mean, that was a pit, that facility. And the hard part was the new prison was built and then COVID came. And it was really hard to get things going. So a lot of us got discouraged. Tiffany, I am so glad that there's now a program that are reaching out for the women to be able to be parents. One of the things that Donna Raycraft and I did was a 3-month, consecutive months of parenting behind the walls. And the different stories that you had. I mean, some had burned bridges, had a really tough time. Others had a lot of kids, and they wanted to be able to reach them. And you're doing things now that make a difference. And I'm very thankful for that. And we should talk further later.
Yeah, come visit. Yeah,
I think most of us got through
we love having people come.
we got through the training program that you scared the heck out of us.
Never mind that.
I'd like to know a little bit more about Shirley. Jimmy was such a dominant force, and this woman stayed with him for all those years. You could, one side, you'd think maybe she was a cream puff and easy, but I gotta believe she had some starch. Can you give us all a little background?
Oh, thank you for that question. I always loved, Shirley was my mother. And, you know, she, yes, was in a very, very difficult situation, being married to a man who, you know, was violent and had a lot of guns and things. So she, I think, firmly believed that if she left him, you know, the same thing might happen that had happened to Doris, and she didn't want her children to have to suffer that. So talk about tough. She was no cream puff. That woman, I don't know how she did it. I mean, she worked the night shift in the Foster Grand Sunglass Factory, you know, and then she'd have to come home, you know, make food from scratch, because he was a Greek guy, was used to, you know, everything is made like in the old country. And so she'd be making pies and bread and, you know, everything, and then maybe get a couple of hours of sleep, and then he'd say, I want some company going to the racetrack, you know, so she went on no sleep. He wouldn't buy her a decent washing machine, so she had the old kind with the wringer, and she'd have to pull the clothes through that and then hang them on the line. And I don't know, honestly, I don't know how she did it. And then she would try to hide and squirrel away little, bits of money to, give us toys at Christmas, or, when I went off to college, she had saved, several $100s she'd managed to do to give me a little something to go away with. But after I was gone, I was always torn myself. I think, why, Mom, leave him, you're, it's horrible. And, she had the difficult, by that point, he'd controlled her for so long that she couldn't, she was afraid, you get it, it's an addiction too. That's a type of an addiction, right? And fear, it's a combination of those two things. So she stayed with him, and he passed away before her, and I was telling this a bit this morning, she was like, face down on the bed for months, I think, after he died. She said, I will not be able to go on. She didn't want to live, even. And she had never done anything. She'd never written a check, even. So I had to teach her how to write a check. And, slowly but surely, like after a year, she woke up one day and said, oh my God, this is great. I mean, he had told her literally what to wear, what to eat. As I said this morning, he once said to her when they were sitting in a restaurant, I'm freezing, put on your sweater. That's how much it was, she didn't have her own sense of temperature. And then she had a neighbor upstairs who was Guatemalan, who was teaching her to make salsa and doing all these things. And then the biggest thing being that she was an enormous, enormous Red Sox fan. And because she'd grown up on a farm in Tuscott, Nova Scotia, and her father had even built a baseball, diamond for, there were 5 boys in the family, and she loved to play baseball. She loved watching baseball. As I said, she'd watch any game, any spring training, Boston College, any the triple A, whatever game. And he hated baseball and had forbidden her to watch it. So she would sneak watching or listening to a game. And then after he died, I actually reached out to the Red Sox, and they were really nice. I said, my mother's been alive, whatever. And they arranged to get really good seats for us. And I said to my sister, for my mom's birthday, he had just died like in April, and her birthday was in June, and she was, like I said, flat out on the bed, not wanting to leave the house. My sister never liked any sports, ever. And I said, I'm taking Mom, it's for her birthday. She said, all right, I'll go. And so I showed up. I actually called her and said, Mom, I've got a birthday surprise for you. And she thought that maybe there were some flowers or something that were being delivered, because she had the shades down. She always had the shades down because she was depressed and miserable. And I said, just raise up the shade. And I was standing there with the Red Sox tickets. I'm from California. She didn't know I had come in from California with the tickets. And we went, and even my sister, when she walked up and saw Fenway Park, stopped in her tracks and went, oh my God, this place is beautiful. And it was the thrill of her life to get to go to Fenway Park. And of course, what year was it? 2004. I don't have to say anything else to this group. She got to see them after years. My father said, what a waste of time, they're bums. They're never going to win anything. She was like, oh, I wish he was alive to see this. Anyway, that's Shirley. I can't mention Shirley without baseball. She's the biggest baseball fan I've ever met. And my husband, who's in the back, is a huge baseball fan. He goes, your mother puts me to shame. She was really like all in for it.
Is there any other questions that anybody has?
In the back.
Reginald Dwayne Betts, a poet, lawyer, being formerly incarcerated. He runs a program out of Massachusetts to get books into prisons. And I heard him on an NPR station saying, it's almost impossible to get books into prison. You'd think that they were smuggling guns in. My question for you is, how difficult or easy is it to get the books you need to get?
Oh, sorry, and I left it with him because he's gonna ask another one, sorry.
It's not my experience. It's pretty simple. I mean, Danielle and Emma are here too at the men's facility. So there's a process. There's a donation form that just needs to be filled out. I mean, we go through it. So it just gets, you can't like send them and have them in the next day. Because there's a process with the donation form and approvals to come in. But we work with, I mean, even Cliff donates thousands and thousands of books for the kids that get sent home. And those are all inside of our facilities. So I think that that's one of the, even like the narrative that's changed over time, because, so I've been there 15 years, and it's different now. It's, you know, we want things to happen. We want programming to come in, and so I know within our program and our division, it's how can we make this work? So a book at this point is pretty simple compared to some of the other things that we dance around and have going on. Each facility has a library, so, but again, that can be all donation, it's just a matter of the forms. And so that's something I can easily help with. Yeah.
Gloria, what are you working on next, movie or book?
Yes, I'm working on a novel, and also, you know, I'm trying, it's a slow process, but I'm trying to get Cuckoo Land adapted as a television, you know, limited series. There's a lot of stuff that didn't, you know, as you know, being a writer, a lot of it is the stuff that you leave out. There's a lot of it that I wished I could have put in the book, and so it would be nice to, you know, go through it again and pull out some more material. So we'll see how that goes, and then I'm working on another, you know, a novel, but it has autobiographical, you know, aspects to it.
And Laurel, do you write, and have you ever thought about writing?
Yeah, I keep a journal pretty, well, I have like, well, you just gave me a new one, so I have 7 different journals for different subjects. Unfortunately, I wrote from the time I could write in diaries, but unfortunately, as I said, I lost them all, which was a huge loss to me. Those in my photo albums were the biggest loss to me, because I kept them as a child, as a teenager. And so when I first got to Dismas House and was getting settled in and stuff, and we were talking about writing, I actually sat down and started writing, you know, from my very earliest memories. And then I read Cuckoo Land, and I said, I wonder if I could write from that aspect, from a child's aspect. No, I tried. I don't know how she did it. It's magical. And I'm so glad I read that book. But yes, I write. It would be a dream. I actually, my daughter is she writes so well. And I like to take a little bit of credit for it. But there's a lot of creativity in my family, so yes, I do write. I can't imagine at this point getting anything done professionally, but I do it for enjoyment, absolutely. And for my kids. I leave it for my kids.
I think we have probably if there's one final Birdie question.
Birdie.
Time for that.
Carol, take us home.
What do you do as far as teenagers now who are always on their phones playing games? How do you get them to read? I have 11 grandchildren, and they're great readers as little ones, and then they get their cell phone, and it's all games. Or, so, maybe.
Well answers.
That's okay, no, I'm good.
So that's a question that comes up, I think, a lot in our support groups, is the idea of how do you get kids off their devices, right? I think that one thing I take away from the different literature groups that we have coming in and the conversations, and I have an 8-year-old too, so I'm on the brink of some of those challenges. I think for us as the adults, it might be shifting our perspective to say, maybe they don't want to read, maybe it is that maybe they want to be read to or listen to a story or write a story. So going with the artistic piece of it, that sometimes we get, so sit down and read a book, or you need to read for this amount of time and it becomes a job. But are there other ways that we can incorporate, and Gloria talked about like media in general, so literature, movies, have a discussion about it. And I think one of the things that we talk about with our parents is using what they're interested in for the dialogue, because if we're talking up here about how it starts that narrative and gets the conversation going, well, that could benefit us too. Hey, what are you watching or playing? How does that connect with this? So sometimes I think it's meeting in the middle and going outside that box and thinking of how to connect with them, because we know from a developmental standpoint, they're gonna oppose what we suggest. So it's just what they're doing. So how can we weave into maybe their flow and kind of trick them? But I think looking at reading from a different media lens of, music, art, literature, all the above.
I don't know. I can't say I'm really optimistic here. It is as a writer, you do feel like, oh, please, I don't want literature to go away. I mean, but maybe, they do tend to like visual things, right, younger people. So if they see, for example, Wicked, there's a history with that story, right? You can go back to The Wizard of Oz, which started as a book. So maybe you can kind of, connect some dots for them there if they're like mad Wicked fans or, but I
Listening to you read your book was fabulous. I mean, your voice, and I want to give books to people, but I want them to listen
yeah.
to books.
Well, that's a good point. I think that a lot of people have said to me, oh, I listen, more and more. I think they're just wanting to hear it. And so, just buy them those things for holidays and, cross your fingers. And, yeah, I wish I had a magic answer to that because, all writers worry that nobody's going to want to be reading any books. Or certainly the movie business is still also, from after COVID, everything, and then we got a strike. But, how many people here even go to the movies? Do you go? Some do?
We have a good independent theater.
Oh, you've got that wonderful, yes, that's a great theater, so you're blessed to have that, yeah. But it both, a lot of the humanities in general, your people like, do they, you worry that people don't see the importance of it in their lives, what it can bring to you. That playing a game is just not going to do that. It's just, it's not enriching in the same way. I've had people actually, because I wanted to understand it, come over, video game people, show me how to do it. I mean, I was really poor at it, but maybe that's why I didn't like it. But it just didn't seem very, I wasn't going to get anything out of it. I don't know what they get out of it exactly. I guess I'm just too old, but I hope you have success with those grandchildren. I'll be interested to hear. Good luck.
Carol, I have a suggestion. I think you should never underestimate the power of a picture book, even a simple picture book without words. I've watched grown men at the men's facility in Concord talk about a wordless picture book and how in this book a wolf is portrayed badly, how they related that to their own life, that they feel like they're stereotyped by being incarcerated. So never underestimate the power of a picture book in having those big conversations about big ideas. So we want to thank you for coming, and I'm going to turn over the concluding remarks to Michael.
But before I do, great round of appreciation for putting Mary put all this together. So I won't keep you long. A few things, story and books and literature. I think people have said it throughout this whole program. The whole idea, Mary's program is called Connections for a reason. These are the things that help connect us to each other, to other minds that are not in the room with us at the moment. And I loved somebody pointing out that when you share a book, it is actually where you really get to know other people. So these are the kinds of programs that we do at New Hampshire Humanities. If you want to find out more about New Hampshire Humanities, there's a lot of information over here. This is just one of the many programs happening around the state. I'm going to read you a long list of people who sponsor Mary's program because we do want to make sure we appreciate them, because this program would not be happening without. And I have to put my glasses on because the writing is small. Bank of America, Bar Harbor Bank and Trust, Citizens Charitable Foundation, Dollar General Literacy Foundation, Ella Anderson Trust, Eversource Energy, Ledger National Bank, M&T Charitable Foundation, Mascoma Bank Foundation, Northeast Delta Dental. These terms may change at any moment. So a few reminders. Stay around and talk to each other. This is a great opportunity to bring together 4 different great groups around the state, and people connected to all of them. Meet some of the people in the room that you don't know already. I've already said you can learn more about what we're doing at New Hampshire Humanities. There's a lot of great programming coming up. I see people from the CDFA in the background. Look for community conversations. Thank you, CDFA. And as a partnership around community centers around the state. That's going to be announced pretty soon, happening all over New Hampshire. There's a great exhibition that's going to be in Jefferson in, Katie's somewhere in the room, in about a month. It's also going to be at the Museum of the White Mountains. It's about change in our communities all around the state. That's going to be, it's called Crossroads, and look on our websites for information on that. There's so much happening around the state, not just with our organization, but with the State Council for the Arts, and all these other great organizations. Be part of it. Be part of the conversation, and get your story into those conversations. Our tagline is always, we connect people and ideas. So connect to some of the people and ideas in the room. Thank you for being here, and we hope to see you at our next program.